Today, of course, I'm going to talk about India today, and also on Wednesday, I'll have a two-part lecture, of course, talking about the Indus River Valley civilizations that, of course, that exist throughout here. So I'll talk about the Indus people, their culture, and I'll talk about some other cultures later, probably today, and of course also tomorrow as well, because I did want to at least cover up like the Maurya. I think the Gupta Empire. I'll also get into them also as well. So anyway, like I said, we're going to be moving on to talk about ancient India today. I'm first going to talk about the background of India. I'll get into like the geography of India. I'll talk about some of its early history, especially dealing with the Indus Valley civilization. I will talk about religion today as well. And anyway, want to go ahead and first talk about, I'll kind of open the slide up for you right here. But I'll talk a little geography about ancient India and the region. Of course, India itself is located, you can see here, in South Asia. That's the location of where it is. I think we've already talked about all the different, pretty much all the River Valley civilizations. I think this is the only one we haven't really covered yet. This semester is India, the second oldest of the River Valley civilization. It kind of dates back roughly 7,000 to 8,000 years ago when farming kind of took off in that part of the region of the world. And it's based around two rivers, kind of like Mesopotamia is. And you can see here the two rivers are basically mostly those two, the Indus and the Ganges River. It's also called the Ganga River, of course, in India. They also got the Brahmaputra. I don't know if you can see that at the top right above the Himalayas. They've got that one as well. But those two are the main two rivers that are predominantly in I guess where modern India or part of ancient India was a long time ago. But agriculture started like I said, I think 5,000-6,000 BC is about right. And the kind of crops they grew there were grain crops, cotton, of course, another kind of crop, and later crops like rice were also grown later in China as well. Modern India is a pretty big country. Well, size-wise, it's not. Like, I think size-wise, I've got here, it's about the third the size of the landmass of the United States, to kind of give you an idea in comparison, like at least where the Republic of India is today. But the population itself is quite big. It's, I think, like 3 or 4 times bigger than our population. And it's about 1.3 billion is their population. Ours is like, I think, 330 million or so, something like that. So their population is 4 times larger than ours. Hey, Ashley, what's going on this morning? You're doing great out there overall. So yeah, pretty large area, of that part of the world, but it's not as big as, say, compared to some other countries like the United States. Now, talk about also the name India itself. Also, the name India evolved from the name Indus, like the river, which is also called Sindhu as well. That's the Sanskritic name. It's also called, and so over time, like going back to like early modern times, a lot of people in Europe would call that area. They would say like Indios or something like that. I think was the term they used. Indios was a common name, and then over time, I think that became like India, but it's, I think, derived from the Latin term Indus, basically from Sindhu. And then Bharat or Bharata, also that's often one of the modern names that they call India today. And supposedly it evolved from a famous king or ruler of India. It's like his name where it came from, and that's supposed the origin of why they sometimes call India that today. But most of India, like the middle part of it, is like you're seeing in the middle there, right here. Actually, I've got a picture showing like actually India right here. You can see with New Delhi, its capital, now a Republic of India. But for many years, India was part of other empires, like the British Empire and things like that, like going back to like the 18th, 19th century, etc. Also, another thing about India that's true, it has a nickname. They often call it the subcontinent or Indian subcontinent. You'll see that name used a lot. And India is like a subdivided region of Asia that's kind of separated off from mountain ranges. There's this, you know what tectonic plates are, right? You've got these different plates that are tectonic plates that are all over the world. Where there's like, if you look at that map there and expand it, where India is the so-called Indian plate right here. And above it is like Asia, like an Asian plate up here. The two are kind of rubbing against each other, and it's causing like basically mountains to form between them. And so you get all these different mountains that kind of subdivide India off from the rest of Asia. Which up, you know, high up north, you've got the Himalayas that are right above, you know, India, where Nepal is and Tibet, and then to the northwest, like going towards like go up here to where Pakistan, Afghanistan, you've got the Hindu Kush Mountains that are right in that area, kind of on the border of Pakistan, and so you got that kind of separating India off, and I think in most pictures of India, like especially from space, it looks like a diamond-shaped peninsula with mountains above it, and that's what it looks like from outer space, kind of. So anyway, but yeah, it's famous for its diamond shape, the way it is, and India is located like right above the Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean's like right below where the tip is, like down here. Then you have the Bay of Bengal over here, the Arabian Sea over here. So it's kind of giving you an idea of where everything is. The area where ancient India was is actually made up of multiple areas. Like I'll kind of put it on the screen here, but India was made up of basically the areas of now what is today Pakistan, Republic of India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, right above it, and then Sri Lanka, which is like on the bottom. So a little island nation right there. But all that at one point was what they call ancient India. And then what happened was in modern times, especially after World War II, that whole area of India broke up into separate countries. Like the partition of India, you may have heard about, 1947. Bangladesh broke off from Pakistan. I think Sri Lanka later also broke off, I guess, from India, etc. And so that's why you have all these separate countries that are there now. That's after the British Empire collapsed and World War II it ended. There's another picture I did want to show you too. It's interesting about India. There it is right there. The northern part of India is real important. It's often called the Indo-Gangetic Plain, or they also call it the other name they dub it is the Indus-Ganges Plain. So it's called either one, basically. And it's the area of India that's the most fertile. Oh, hey, Jessica. Hope you're having a great morning out there. But yeah, it's the most fertile area. It's like basically where, like I said, where agriculture started. It's also where civilization first started in ancient India. In fact, you go to this map here, most of civilization and farming started over here where the Indus River is, and it went from west to east. So that's kind of how they think happened. And so India really started over here, but later, like empires and states are mostly dominant in eastern India and Bangladesh, around the Ganges or Ganga River. You know, like the Maurya and Gupta empires and all that later. They're all based around those empires, etc. It's a 2,000-mile wide area, by the way, going from west to east. So from Pakistan to Bangladesh, it's about 2,000 miles roughly. It's very populated, like about 1 billion people live in that whole area, like in that green area where the main tributaries of those two rivers are. I guess the Brahmaputra, I'm going to throw that in there as well. New Delhi is the most populated city, which is in northern India, Republic of India. Population, the metro area is 26 million, to give you an idea. So it's one of the most populated cities in the world, although I think Tokyo's got more people population-wise in the world. So, and there's another area below. I don't think I've got a picture of it, but this area like right here below it, about right there below the Indo-Gangetic Plain, which is, they usually call it the Deccan Plateau, is what they called it. It's kind of like this flat plateau area of India. And it kind of runs from like west to east across India. It's not very tall. I think it's like, I want to say it's like, I think on the eastern side of it, I think it's about 2,000 feet tall. And then as it goes west, maybe a few hundred feet, it actually goes down toward the Arabian Sea, I guess. And it's like between these two mountain ranges that are on the eastern and western sides of India, which is the Western Ghats on the western side of India and the Eastern Ghats on the eastern side of India. But it's not known for like agriculture as much. Like they do a lot of farming there too as well. But farming is more bigger in the north. But the like in ancient times, I think most of the Deccan Plateau was important for like having a lot of rich minerals, precious stones and things like that, rather than I think farming as much. But like I said, in India, a lot of the big things they farm today is like rice, cotton, it's big, tea, coffee. They produce a lot of coffee, believe it or not, throughout the world. I thought they're second in tea production behind China, I believe, but they're famous probably more for cotton. I know Indian cotton, you know, Egyptian cotton are pretty famous, I know, worldwide. Another thing I did want to mention too, which is famous about India, like in ancient times and also in modern times, they're known for the so-called monsoon seasons that affect the subcontinent a lot, where they get these rainy seasons. You get it in East Africa, you get it in parts of Southeast Asia as well. And during the summertime, they have these rainy seasons that they have, which last around, they start about right now, June, last to like August, September. And they sometimes call it the Southwest monsoon because if I go to this map here to kind of show you, I guess, what happens is the winds kind of blow in from the southwest off the Indian Ocean. And they bring out a lot of rainstorms, which last for several months. And the monsoon season is very important because it's where a lot of the areas of Indian subcontinent, they get a lot of their precipitation, like 80% of the precipitation that they get pretty much whole year is during those 3-4 months. That's it. The rest of the year is like a dry season. So it obviously affects their agricultural production. And I know for years they've been talking about, I want to say going back to like the 1990s or maybe the early 2000s, they haven't been getting enough rain like they should. So the monsoon, yeah, I know in Pakistan they get a lot of flooding with the Indus River, I know, but it's not flooding as much as it used to do, with the rainfall. But they have a winter monsoon. I think they call it the northeast monsoon. And what happens is, if you go to the map here, the winds go the other way from the Himalayas. I guess the winds come down, and it's more of a dry season, like the other way, on that way. So it kind of it reverses what it does the rest of the year. But India's like us. I don't know if you know it, but they get like, we get hurricanes. We almost had that storm, we had last week that kind of, I guess, flooded Alabama and Florida. You saw they get hurricanes like we do, but they call them cyclones. That's what they call them in that part of the world. I think in Asia and Pacific, they call them typhoons. So they're kind of all similar. They don't get them as bad as we do in the Pacific, but they sometimes do get hit by them, And I know a bunch of years ago, they had this bad tsunami. They have tsunamis and earthquakes. I know they've been having problems with, here and there that they get also as well. So all kinds of natural catastrophes kind of happen in that region that kind of cause a lot of havoc. All right, I want to go ahead and move on. And we're going to talk about today, I want to get into and discuss about the Indus Valley civilization that existed. This, of course, was one of the earliest civilizations that existed in ancient India a long time ago. They were around, I think, roughly about, you can see here, 5,000 years ago, I think at the most. You can see like 5,000 range is what it was. Yeah, it was one of the earliest civilizations that first developed overall. It was a Bronze Age culture, by the way, that flourished mostly in the Indus River Valley. And that's why they started calling it later in modern times. They called it Indus Valley civilization. They have another name they called it. They also call it sometimes Harappan, which I'll kind of explain later, but it's named after one of these cities they found called Harappa. And so people call it Harappan with an N on it instead. But most people call it Indus Valley civilization, which is kind of a mouthful. I think some people call it IVC for short, because it's such a long name, or they'll just say Indus people or something like that as well. And you can see here, yeah, they first discovered it in the 1850s. So it was something like fairly new, these kind of cultures you're looking at. And most of them were found like in like Pakistan is where most of it was, part of Afghanistan, and I think part of northern India as well. That's where they found a lot of this culture. I'll get to Mohenjo-Daro a little bit, but that's considered like the one you saw in the video is one of the biggest cities that they discovered more than anything. That's the most famous. I do have some images, I think, showing some of their cities. Like here's the one, of course, in the video they were talking about, which is Mohenjo-Daro, which a lot of this has been kind of restored, like in Pakistan. That's kind of what they think it looked like, a lot of these cities. And they think that this culture peaked about 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. They had agricultural type, cities, as far as they know, villages. Most of their cities were made of mud brick, like the Sumerians were. I think like kind of like a fired baked type mud brick that they used. The population-wise, we see there, they may have exceeded close to 5 million people at one point, which I think was the largest civilization in the world at that time. Yeah, so some of their populations were the largest in the world, even bigger in Mesopotamia, they think. But they later declined as a culture. But those two people, Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, those agricultural sites are considered the ones that were the most largest that they found, which I think ranged around, I think the one for Mohenjo-Daro is about 40,000. And I think Harappa is a little smaller, like 20, 30,000, I think is how big that one was right there. Mohenjo-Daro is a name that means either city or some people say mound or hill of the dead. I think is used the translation of it. It's a nickname. And they called it that because apparently when archaeologists were working at the site, they found like human remains that were buried in a like some kind of mound, like a large burial ground. And so hence the name being used for the site. I think Harappa is just named after a local village that was nearby in now what is Pakistan. You can see that picture. I guess that one kind of shows you, but most of their cities, like they said in the video, are built on a grid plan, like most, cities are today, like crisscrossing streets and things like that, and blocks, which are kind of like square or rectangular shaped. And they do think they had multi-storied buildings, like 2 or 3 story buildings. They had at one point, but they've only rebuilt like most of like the bottom part of some of the buildings that are there in Pakistan. I think I've got other pictures showing Mohenjo-Daro. I'll get to it later, but they're doing it with a great bath of Mohenjo. I think that might be one of the most famous things they ever discovered at Mohenjo-Daro is the Great Bath. It's not much known about the culture except from archaeology because they've got written records from that time, but nobody can read them, which is a big problem. But they're famous for all kinds of technologies, like drainage systems. Like when it rains, the water would drain away. They had sewage systems that drained sewage from their homes, from palaces. They had wells to get water. They got like 700 wells or more they found like around the site, like at Mohenjo-Daro. Running water and toilets, that's something they had in ancient times too. Like plumbing and things like that did exist a long time ago. Granary sites, and then baths. Baths were quite common. Of course, the most famous is the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro that you're looking at. This is some kind of bath and water tank that they may have used for, they think, bathing in what they think was some kind of ritualistic purposes that may have been involved with like early religion in India. I think there's some theories that maybe early Hinduism may have started around this time. So that put it back about 5,000 years ago, because some people think Hinduism is one of the oldest religions in the world. I think there's even, if they think across the street from it, there may have been some kind of temple that may have been there. They think that's like theorized anyway about that. But that is considered one of the most famous archaeological things they found at that site. Also, it's got some kind of citadel that was there. So obviously they were fighting some kind of warfare. They had some kind of fortress with it as well to protect the city also. So they have kind of restored that. I think those two are the most famous things that's at that site that's there. But I think I have another picture showing the granary site that's at Harappa as well. So they had sites where they would store their grain, I guess, all year round and all that. Also, they think they had some kind of writing system, like language system that was called, they call it different names, but it was either called today Indus script or Harappan is what they called it. They're not sure the origin of it. They think it's related to what they call Dravidian, that's still spoken like in mostly central southern India today. But like I said, it's indecipherable. They did put it like on seals and things like that that they discovered. But like I said, nobody can read it. Nobody can translate it. So it's kind of like the Minoan language, like Linear A. Nobody could read that either also. But they were primarily, like I said, a Bronze Age culture. They found evidence of copper being used, tin, gold, things like that at the site, bronze, but no iron yet. So pretty much a Bronze Age culture. They had some religion, but it's kind of primitive. I think there's evidence that they worship some kind of mother goddesses, they think, that might be similar to like Shakti or something, like some of the later gods they have in ancient India. Now, what happened to the Indus people? Well, there's all kinds of theories that they eventually declined as a culture. It's been often compared with the Maya. Here, the Maya, how they kind of declined and disappeared as a culture, and then also the Minoans. Minoans kind of declined overnight as well, and so they think sometime after 1900 BC, their civilization just collapsed overnight. And there's been all kinds of theories on what caused the culture to disappear. And you saw in the video, they kind of talked about some of the things that they think happened, like climate change is like a big thing that could have happened, where the river changed course, a drought, could have been like the monsoon, could have been like not there, like hardly any rain or anything like that. There's been some cases in ancient times where the monsoons were not that powerful, not that much rain coming in. And so that could have caused them to abandon their cities and things like that. It's kind of what the Maya did, abandon their cities and things like that as well. So that's been a very popular theory about what happened. And then there's another theory they talk about as well, which I'll kind of I'll show to you as well. And that's the so-called Aryan migration. There's this other theory that Aryan peoples from what is like part of Europe eventually migrated into India and took it over. It's a very popular theory that started in the 20th century that became big. And so some people think that's pretty much all the main theories. It's like climate change, drought, earthquakes is another theory too they put up forth as well. And then the Aryan invasions as well. It's also called the Indo-Aryan or Aryan migrations, is what they're also called as well. And what happened was a lot of these so-called Caucasian peoples originated from Eastern Europe and the Caucasus. You have the Caucasus, which are kind of like southern Russia and the Ukraine. It's about where it is. And you can see that purple area, which is in the middle there. It's kind of like, if you look at this map here, it's like right above where the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea is. So it's right here. And then you can see some migrated west into Europe. Some went into Turkey, like the Hittites. You got the Persians in Iran. And then you got all these Indo-Aryan peoples that ended up in India later. So down here, like India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. So you can see the migration of these peoples. And the Aryans, by the way, the name, a little bit about it, when they settled the subcontinent, the name Aryan was a Sanskrit name. Like it's the name they coined for their people, which either means freeborn or noble birth, because they were trying to kind of separate themselves from the indigenous people that were already there. That's later going to cause the caste system, I think, to kind of evolve over time. And a lot of people confuse the term Aryan with you ever heard the Aryan race and the whole Aryan thing that Adolf Hitler and the Nazis created, Aryan race and all that, and the Germans are related to that, and maybe they were, I don't know. Of course, Europeans related to Aryans, I guess, later, but Indo-Aryans, but that kind of was something they started developing in the 20th century to say about that. But I think most of the Aryan peoples are lighter skinned, but they're usually kind of a dark hair, probably brown eyes, and not blonde hair, blue eyes, though, like you see in Northern Europe. Hitler wasn't even blonde hair. I think he had blue eyes, but yeah, black hair. But anyway, so yeah, and I'll kind of talk about the Aryan culture. The Aryans brought in different things that they're kind of known for. The Aryan people, Aryan civilization that comes in. They did introduce Sanskrit, like I was talking about that. Sanskrit is a type of Indo-Aryan language that became dominant throughout the Indian subcontinent. Became basically the language that would create all the other languages throughout India. Of course, today the common dialect spoken in India, Indian language, is Hindi. You know about that. I think most people know that in India. Anyway, that's the basis of it, where it evolved from. But a lot of their ancient, like religious scriptures, like in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, etc., were all originally written in Sanskrit. So that's something they did introduce as well. Also, the Aryans were the ones that brought in a lot of, they think, the theology, like the main theology anyway, of what would be Hinduism, like the religion that would kind of take off there in India, which Hinduism probably develops at least 3,000 to 4,000 years ago or more. And they brought in these religious texts that were called Veda, or the Vedas. What were the Vedas? The Vedas were these sacred religious texts that were originally oral in tradition. They were like chanted and passed down from generation to generation. Eventually they think during the so-called Vedic age, I think the Vedic age is usually about 500 to 1500 BC. They started writing them all down. And they were written in Vedic Sanskrit, but you can see they only had 4 that survived from ancient times: the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and the Atharva Veda as well. And the one that's the most famous one, it's the oldest one of the 4, is the Rig Veda. It's the longest. It has the most books in it, and it's considered one of the oldest Indo-Aryan books in the world. It's not the oldest book in the world, believe it or not. I probably think it's the Bible. I think they say the oldest book in the world is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is kind of like a text or whatever, but it's like basically a book now. But it's considered one of the oldest things that was probably written down that's still around as a book or whatever for now. So, but that's considered like one of the oldest, of course, Indo-Aryan book, like basically in the world. So that's the basis of it. They do have these other scriptures you can see too, Brahmanas, Upanishads. Those are just late Vedic texts that were also popular as well. They were written down more later after the other Vedas were written down. And I think a lot of those deal with more like interpretation of a lot of the ideology in Hinduism, like the ideas of what the soul is and reincarnation and things like that, that appear in the theology of Hinduism. So a lot of that's important, like Sanskrit and all the things that were written in that later on. A lot of the teachings of Buddha, like a lot of his works of Buddha, that were written down later, were written in Sanskrit originally. Then a lot of these were translated into, of course, different languages, things like that. Now, I did want to get in today also. I forgot to talk about one thing I did want to mention about, which is famous. When the Aryans came into India, it's believed that they came down through the Hindu Kush mountains, like through the northwest. It's hard to get into India from the north, from the north, because of the Himalayas that are there. But the best way to invade India is from the northwest. And all the different conquerors that have come into India, was Alexander the Great, the Mongols, the Huns, other groups that took over India, they all came in from the northwest, and they went down passes like the Khyber Pass, which is well known. The Khyber Pass is one of like 2 major passes that are in the Hindu Kush between like Afghanistan and Pakistan. The other one is the Bolan Pass, I think it's like 30-something miles long, and it's very important for like trade. It's like a highway system running from west to east through there. You can see the road kind of running through there in that map. And I think that's how, I don't know if you remember, they were trying to catch out Osama bin Laden. That's how he got out. I think he went down one of those passes probably to go from Afghanistan to Pakistan. So he later got killed in Pakistan. You know about that. So he went down one of those mountains passes probably get through there. So that's how they got in, and invaded, took over, they think, part of India. So all the cultures kind of mixed, I guess, after that. All right, so let me talk about one more thing today, of course, which I did want to get into and talk about Hinduism. That's something that's, of course, very famous, of course, in India today, is the rise, in the spread of Hinduism in the world. And Hinduism, if you know about it, that's the traditional nickname, especially in the West, that they call the religion of India, especially Hinduism. That's there today. It's like really the main traditional religion. They have the most over other religions. I want to say 80% of population, Republic of India, is Hindu. So it's the 3rd largest religion in the world. Its population-wise, they think that practice it. It's like 1.2 billion people. So that's third behind what is, I think, first is Christianity, then Islam, and then Hinduism. And I think fourth, I want to say after that, is Buddhism would be the next thing that kind of comes in after that. It's kind of, I'll get to it later, but they do have a nickname for it. They do call it sometimes Sanatana Dharma, which has different translations. Eternal life, eternal righteousness. I think I've got some translations like that. And the Hindus do believe this idea that all living things have a soul, like an eternal soul, and you can reincarnate, which is a different theology compared to the West. Like in the West, a lot of your traditional religions like Christianity, Islam, even Judaism, think there's like a heaven or hell, that kind of thing, and where your soul goes after you die. So yeah, there's a lot of big differences in like a lot of the theologies. Buddhism, Jainism, those kind of religions have kind of similar beliefs about reincarnation overall. Anyway, I mean, look at this map here, but you can see that Hinduism is in different countries. I'll kind of put a bunch of them on the screen as examples, but like at least in that Indian subcontinent, if you look at like India and Nepal, those two countries have a Hindu majority. In fact, the only ones that have a Hindu majority, I don't know if you know that or not, but India and Nepal right above it are 80% Hindu. And then the rest are all other different religions. Christianity, Islam, Buddhist, Sikhism, etc. Bhutan's got about 22% Hindu. Sri Lanka's got 13%. Pakistan's got 2%. So those are like areas that are like basically around where India is today. You can see also worldwide, Malaysia's got 7%, close to Indonesia. Indonesia's got 4%, especially in the Bali province. It's like majority Hindu that they have. I don't know if you know Guyana, which is in like, I think it's in like South America. I think it's South America. I think that's correct. I think it's Guyana. I think it's where it is. It's got 25% Hindu, which is kind of surprising about that. But anyway, that's kind of showing like there's Hindus all over the world, but most of the majority of them are based predominantly around the subcontinent. That's where they are today. So they haven't spread as much. Like Buddhism spread more into like East Asia, where it's because it started in India, you know, but it's more based in East Asia and the Pacific, etc. And Buddhism, I think, is more worldwide, like all over the world, compared to maybe Hinduism. So anyway, let me also talk about some of the major theological beliefs. These are some of the major theological beliefs that are in Hinduism. They have Brahman, which I'll talk a little bit about today, Atman, reincarnation, I think people know about the most. And then also they call it moksha. You might not have heard of moksha, but if you're a Buddhist or whatever, you may have heard of nirvana, which is kind of similar to it, the Buddhist version of that overall. Now, what is Brahman? Brahman is kind of hard to explain. Usually they say it's the ultimate reality of the universe. It's like this metaphysical idea that there's some kind of supreme existence or ultimate reality that exists throughout the universe. Some people think it's like a supreme being where the whole universe is kind of like God, if you want to put it that way. But that's maybe, I guess, an explanation about what it could be. But Brahman it exists everywhere. It's in all living things. It's in all gods. It's in all non-living things. And it's totally different from, say, like the West, where they have a heaven and God's in heaven and that kind of thing, and it's angels and all that. That's something totally different compared to like Brahman theology and things like that. They also have what they call Atman. It's the idea that all living things have like some kind of soul. They call it self or soul or something like that. It's like the translation of Sanskrit. And it's this belief that all living things, humans and animals, insects and other things, worms and things like that, all have some kind of eternal soul that can kind of be reborn. So, you live your life cycle of, being born, you live your life, you die, and then you get reborn again into it's like another living thing. And so the cycle of being reborn could go on forever. And so they usually refer to it as being called, as you know, they dub it, the term, of course, which is reincarnation, is, of course, the term which where a soul is reborn into like another living thing. And they have like what they call also they call samsara. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, samsara, but it's the so-called transmigration of the souls, where the souls are constantly being reborn into like another living thing. So like in your life, you could be like a human form, and then I guess in your next life, you could come back as some other living thing, is what could happen. So you might come back as an animal or something like that. Anyway, so they have reincarnation. Then they have also, they have things that can affect reincarnation, such as like, they have like karma, dharma, those kind of things can also affect reincarnation. Karma is like your actions, like your positive or negative actions in your life that might affect your future life, or it might affect your next life. So it might affect how you get reincarnated. Your soul gets reborn in your next life. And so it can also affect your, your future life. If you do bad things in your life, it could cause bad things to happen later in your life as well. So what comes around goes around. I think sometimes what they'll say about it, about karma in general. And so yeah, karma is one thing, your actions, and then also dharma, which I think means law. Dharma is like different things. It could be like your duties, rights, laws, conduct, virtues, right way of living. These things that could affect your soul later in life. Anyway, it's a big concept which is really important in a lot of different religions, such as Hinduism is, of course, a part of it. I know Buddhism, it's real big, and Sikhism and Jainism, and so Dharma is considered like basically a certain way of life, how they live their life, and so on. But they talk about other things too, like religious rituals, pilgrimages, prayer, and things like meditation and things like that, yoga, other things like that could affect reincarnation down the line. And there is a belief that over time that eventually your soul will stop reincarnating. Reincarnation could last thousands of years, hundreds of years. Your soul might be reincarnating. So it's believed that eventually your soul will go through what they call moksha, where your soul will be liberated from the cycle of reincarnation, it's samsara. And then the Buddhists, I think Jains also kind of sometimes call it nirvana or nibbana, where your soul is kind of released. I think they call it blowing out or whatever. But the Buddhists and the Jains, I'll get to them later. The Buddhists and the Jains, they have different theories on, how to end reincarnation. Buddhists believe that they follow the teachings of Buddha, live kind of a middle path, to their life, and follow the 8 dharma that Buddha set out. That the soul will be liberated, nirvana, and they'll end reincarnation like in one lifetime. I think Jainism, it's more extreme asceticism, and things like that, where they use like a lot of fasting, and they believe that you shouldn't have like a lot of desires and physical things. So there's different theories on how you obtain ending reincarnation and all that. So anyway, Now, later in the week on Wednesday, I'm going to kind of move on. We'll talk about next. I don't think I'm going to have enough time today to really get into it, but I'll kind of wrap up on India on Wednesday. I'll talk about the caste system in India that they have, which is kind of like this social class system you have heard about. That's kind of prevalent still today, although it's been banned. You know about that. We'll talk about that. I'll talk about the gods in Hinduism, like the traditional gods. I'll kind of go through some of them, like a few of them that are kind of famous. They think there may have been millions of gods in Hinduism at one point. I'll talk about Buddhism, who Buddha was. I'll talk about Jainism as well. I don't really cover much on Jainism, but I'll kind of spend a few minutes on that, explain what's the difference between Jainism and Buddhism, because they're kind of rival systems that kind of broke away from Hinduism. I'll also talk about briefly for a few minutes also about some of the chief empires that developed in India. I'll talk about the Maurya Empire and the Gupta empires, which were really the empires that peaked in the so-called golden age of India. So that's it for today. Doesn't look like there's any questions today on ancient India, but if you have any questions about the lecture, let me know later. If you're having trouble going in and out of StreamYard, you might want to just go on YouTube and watch it instead. It might be your connection. I am streaming in 1080 pixels. You wonder about that. So it might be difficult if you have a different kind of stream on your end. But if you have any questions, let me know about this lecture or any other lecture about that. But before I go, don't forget first exam. Of course, I've got that up to pretty much from last week. That'll be pretty much due by the weekend. I might extend it a couple days maybe for you if you get behind on it, but that's pretty much up. So you have study guides that you kind of complete for that. Do upload those to the assignment on Canvas. Second vocab is still up already. That's also due next week. And I will have a quiz on India tomorrow that I'll have after I finish up Ancient India Part 2 lecture on like Wednesday. So that's it for today. Hope y'all have, like I said, a great week, pretty much. And yeah, it's kind of hot, I guess, huh? But I guess we dodged the bullet of that storm from last week. So y'all take care. I'll see you on Wednesday for my part 2 lecture, of course, on Ancient India.